Who is best girl? Easy. Tangirl best girl, Mio. Who is best girl? Easy. Ushio. Who is best girl? Easy. Hizuru. Who is best girl? Easy. Ushios. It feels like every week fans of Summertime Rendering have to deal with this. Every week there's another best girl. But yeah, this another week of Andrew's theories just going right out the window. And I'm not mad. I'm actually not mad. I think there's something to be said that I love theorizing on stuff. Honestly, I really do. And I don't feel bad when those theories don't turn out. Like it does something different. It's actually exciting. I like when a writer just does something completely different. Now, there's something to be said that whenever you have some great theories and then suddenly the actual thing that happens is just like disappointing, that's when it feels bad. But when a writer knows how to take it in a different direction and really surprise you, I'm all for it. And I think this week did that again. I'm perfectly fine with, again, my theories around the disconnection of the shadow from the shadow Mio. I think that's a really cool theory, but I'm sure they're going to do something really cool with it going forward. But anyways, with all that said, yes, Summertime Rendering episode 9, really fantastic episode, really finally getting some insights into the past and how things kind of led up to the current. Every week it continues to surprise me and I cannot wait for more, but with that said, let's jump into episode 9. Opening up the episode, yes, we finally get to see what's on the video on Ushio's phone after we had this nice long cliffhanger. But yeah, it turns out it is actually the original Ushio and the Shadow Ushio, and they are talking to either Shadow Ushio or Shinpei, which is a little bit weird. I don't know why she would assume that the Shadow Ushio would be watching the video unless she just wants to watch it again to remind herself. It's a nice little introduction. It was actually really cute, and they touch on it again later on, this idea that they start to bicker. Like, do you know who the real Ushio is? And they start bickering with each other, and Shinpei and So is trying to figure it out, and the Shadow Ushio says, who cares? Like, they're both. Like, what does it matter? They're both me. And then it was kind of teary-eyed later on having the Shadow Ushio say the same thing. She was thinking the same thing at that point. Who cares? Now, this could be a signal that at that point she got her memory back because she's recalling the same thing the Shadow Mio said in the video at that time. Who cares? And it's heartfelt for her because she's struggling. She's wondering, will Shinpei watching me right now on this video know which one's me? Will he recognize me as the real one? She's desiring that she would be the one that would have Shinpei's attention. Would Shinpei care that she's a shadow? Because even the clone believes that she is the real Ushio and thus has the true desires for Shinpei. She loves Shinpei. She's a copy. And it's, again, this is the continuous thing that I will continue to really enjoy about this show and this idea of the perfect copy, is that exchange of the actual feelings that they have. Now, honestly, there is an argument to be made here that the regular Ushio believes that she's just dead. Oh, well, if you're watching this, I'm dead. I don't know why she would come to that conclusion at that time. I mean, again, this goes back to the idea that she probably does know about the myth about seeing your shadow, you will die, or it will come to kill you. But there's nothing to make her believe that she's going to face something terrifying because she's just met a shadow clone of herself that's perfectly fine. That's not trying to kill her. That has saved her life. But again, she's technically just come from this whole encounter with a bad shadow, so I guess that makes sense. But anyway, this whole video is to explain what's happened and explain to Shinpei what has unfolded and what may unfold. This, of course, begins the point in which Shiori tells her that she has seen her shadow up in the mountains. Nobody kind of believes it, but they kind of move on from that point to her cleaning the beachside with Mio, and that's when they see the shadow, the flash first, and then the shadow copy of herself. Returning back home, we get a little bit of a cute exchange between Mio and Ushio, kind of mentioning the idea that she hopes that Shinpei will come back, and then Ushio's like, I don't care about him, and she's like, well, no, you love him, don't you? And that completely throws her off. But then she sees her shadow self inside of the bathroom, and that completely throws her off. She knows the idea that, why are you hiding? You're obviously suspicious. She's like, well, you're with Mio. I can't just pop up out of nowhere. Obviously, that would really throw somebody off. Now, of course, this is the point in which some of my theories really just got thrown out the window. Again, for those that have not watched my previous videos, my mindset was that Ushio was, yes, cloned by a shadow, but then that Hishikata or somebody was involved that kind of separated the bad shadow from the flesh of the copy. Which, yes, part of that theory was thrown away last episode because we finally found out that the shadow Ushio does feel senses from her shadow, and yes, it was cut. But this kind of implies that Hishikata was not involved quite yet. That from the beginning, the shadow Ushio was a good shadow, that she didn't desire to kill the original. Now, this still opens the door to the idea that whatever flashed Ushio on the beach could have been a good shadow, like a second faction of the shadows. There is, of course, the group that is being head by Heine, but then there's going to probably be another group that maybe Hishikata is involved with that has a shadow out there that's copying people, and they're making good copies. But at the same time, there still seems to be some sort of innate desire. Because later on, the shadow Ushio does mention, I do have a desire to get rid of you. Like, it's still there. Like, I have this feeling that eventually I will disappear unless I get rid of you. That a copy will eventually fade unless it removes the original from the picture and becomes the original, which makes perfect sense. You're always going to be a copy until you become the original because you're the only one. At this point, for some reason, it seems like Ushio comes to the realization she needs to go find the shadow Shiori. I'm not sure why. She's at this point realizing this shadow is not a threat, but even still, it at least solidifies the idea that, oh yeah, Shiori did see a shadow. I'm seeing one right here, so let's go find it. But at this point and later points, I did like the fact that throughout this entire episode, we're getting a sense that this is truly a perfect copy. She is an absolute dork, just like her original. And they're always kind of in sync. I really did like that whole idea. I mean, even when they're on the video together, they're saying the same thing at the same time. But yeah, she sees a sign and she goes, oh, yeah, we need to go in here. And they both just think the same thing. Whenever you see signs like this, you want to go in. But this is interesting because as they come in here, they find the old Hishikata clinic. And there's rumors around this clinic that there's ghosts here, which we can kind of assume is probably people seeing shadows. But what was interesting is that as they're standing there, eventually the shadow Ushio wants to go inside. The original's like questioning, are you actually going to do this? And the shadow says, it feels weird because it feels like I've been here before. There you go. Another indication that, again, this good side of the shadows is somehow connected with Hishikata. And I kind of even claim that this shadow that appears here might also be involved with Hishikata. I don't know, this shadow that we're seeing that attacks them is necessarily a full-on bad shadow. I don't know this shadow is involved with Heine because it doesn't outright kill them. Yes, it harms them, it pushes away the original, it binds up the shadow, it stabs the shadow almost like it was testing it, but it doesn't kill her. And then it flees. It's not really acting like you typically see with the normal shadows. Yes, the other shadow group has fleed, but they're much more vicious. They're much more at your throat. This one seemed like it was scared and it was running away. So I'm kind of curious if this one is somehow going to be involved with Hishikata. But yeah, this is the point in which the shadow Ushio honestly realizes that it is a shadow. It's not human. It's been harmed by its leg, even though it didn't attack its leg. And then it comes a realization of how itself works. That the core is the shadow and that the flesh is to protect it. So she's able to manipulate it. She's manipulating her hair to be blades to slice this thing up, eventually darting after it and slicing up all these fences to destroy the shadow. But again, this is where it comes to realize that it needs to get rid of the original, that it will one day fade, but it's, again, still doesn't want to harm the original, even though it's kind of established at this point that I have to do that to survive. But again, this was a surefire sign that whatever was coming after Shiori was a threat, and so they are going to go after to protect Shiori. And this is the end of the video, and this, of course, is the point in which they have the kind of breakdown of the shadow Ushio realizing all of her memories, realizing that she is a copy and all this kind of stuff, and a realization of her power. She remembers everything, so she remembers her power. She's able to give Shinpei and So a vision of what happened. She's able to use her abilities to show them the data that she's kind of cultivated all this time, which is what happened on that day. She copies Ushio's swimwear and then eventually turns herself into this shell necklace, at which point she realizes Shiori's in trouble. She rushes out there, and of course this leads to this long, unfortunate series of events where they're essentially fighting the shadow Shiori underwater. I would argue probably the worst location they can, because I don't know that these shadows really need to breathe. She's able to continuously pull them under, even though they keep fighting back, until eventually they drown. Both the original Shiori and the original Ushio. But there's one other thing that happens here which kind of explains a lot that happened in this episode. Why does the shadow Ushio not know anything? And that was because of the last thing that Shiori was going to do. It seemed like she was going to absorb, or at least get rid of, the shadow Ushio. But then she got interrupted. But it did seem like there was a process that was happening where she was leaking herself into her face, and I think that was something that kind of removed a lot of that data, or at least corrupted it, so that the shadow Ushio never remembered anything that happened. And yes, that would explain why the following day she would eventually wash up on shore as the shadow Ushio without any memories. But one other important thing happened this whole exchange was the original Ushio saved the shadow Ushio's life, sent her on without her. And this is something that the shadow Ushio wants to repay. It kind of instills something in her that she wants to stop these shadows. She wants to avenge the original. And yes, one last thing happened in this whole flashback, and that was that Heine, through this whole process, was able to essentially seep in and contact them, grabs Shinpei's arm and says, "I've been looking for you for a long time. I won't let you escape." And even though they're able to pull themselves out of this memory, Shinpei's left with almost like a shadowy mark on his arm. My assumption is probably something that allows her to find him, like leaving a part of a shadow on him so that she can find him no matter where he's at. It'll be interesting to see what that mark possibly causes him, or if it's just a mark from grabbing him. But yeah, overall, crazy episode. Really did enjoy it. Had some really emotional points in there, like I mentioned before. I always love the conflict of the copy and the feelings they get through being a copy of somebody else, giving them an actual, again, a true nature of being the original person. Well, I will say that the whole reveal of what all unfolded on that day was a little bit less, I guess, crazy than I thought it was originally going to be. It was still to get across what happened that day, even though most of it was kind of self-explanatory. Like, you almost didn't need to see it to know that that's really what happened. But I think the most impactful thing of what this episode did was really show us that the shadow Ushio has something at stake here. Like, she does appreciate what the original did for her, that she is a good entity that wants to see the end to all these other shadows. Again, we're still trying to find out what exactly flashed to create her. Is that a different group of shadows? And additionally, what's the involvement of Hishikata's clinic? Why was that the focal point? Why is this other shadow that was there? Was it fleeing because it's also one that could be good? Maybe the thing that was at the clinic created her. But again, they've mentioned before that there's certain shadows that have the ability to duplicate, whereas it seems like most shadows flash and gather data and become the person. There's specific ones that are able to duplicate themselves. That's what we've seen in the Shadow Mio. That's what we saw technically in Shiori's shadow. This ability that when they flash something, they create it separate from themselves, which again, at some point they mentioned that was a special attribute. And that could be the same case with whatever created the shadow Ushio. But technically the shadow that we've seen at the Hishikata clinic seemed like it was turning into Ushio. It wasn't producing a separate shadow. And that could be the case with the creation of the shadow Ushio. It could have been a shadow that just turned into Ushio rather than producing another one. But we'll see. I'll be curious to see what kind of unfolds as it goes along with that. Again, that was a really fantastic episode. I think really giving a lot of character to the shadow Ushio, like I said before. And I think that's going to make whatever happens going forward really excellent, because I've already gotten the shadow Ushio has kind of been one of those characters where she is just the old Ushio, but I think this episode really made her her own self. I no longer see her as just a copy of the original. And I think if anything, hopefully Shinpei sees the same thing. This isn't Ushio, but this is a different Ushio that is its own self, has its own driving force, and is kind of branched off from the original. But at any rate, that's my thoughts on episode 9. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below. Comment, let me know what you thought of the episode. Subscribe if you've not already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon. I'll throw a tips link in the description below. We also have a super thanks button down there. We definitely appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care.